The manor didn't forgive weakness. Seraphine learned that her first winter at Blackthorn, when the ancient stone walls seemed to swallow warmth whole and spit back only judgment. Now, 7 winters later, she moved through the corridors like a woman who'd forgotten how to make noise. Her footsteps were measured, her breathing shallow. Even her presence had become something she'd trained herself to minimize, as though taking up less space might somehow make her failure less visible. It was December 1878, and the frost had come early that year. She stood in the conservatory watching ice creep across the windows in patterns that looked almost deliberate, cruel even. Beyond the glass, the Blackthorn estate stretched toward hills that had long since surrendered to winter's grip. Everything was white. Everything was still. It matched the house perfectly. "My lady," Seraphine turned. Mrs. Hallowell, the head housekeeper, stood in the doorway with that particular expression, the one that meant someone important wanted something, and Seraphine was expected to comply without question. "Lady Verena requests your presence in the drawing room." Of course she did. Seraphine smoothed her skirts, though they didn't need smoothing. It was a habit now, something to do with her hands when her chest tightened. "I'll be there shortly." Mrs. Hallowell didn't leave. She emphasized immediately, "my lady." The words were polite, the meaning wasn't. Seraphine nodded and followed the housekeeper through hallways that echoed with their silence. 7 years in this house, and still the servants looked at her like she was something temporary, a placeholder. The Duke's wife, in title only, waiting to be replaced by someone who could actually fulfill the most basic expectation of her position. An heir. The word haunted every room. It lived in the space between her and Rowan, growing larger each year until there was nothing else left. Lady Verena Blackthorn occupied the drawing room like a general surveying enemy territory. She was Rowan's aunt, his father's sister, and she'd made it her life's mission to ensure Blackthorn tradition remained uncontaminated by softness or sentiment. She was 63, dressed in black silk that probably cost more than most families earned in a year, and her spine had never met a chair back it trusted. "You're late," Verena said without looking up from her correspondence. Seraphine had arrived within 3 minutes of being summoned. "My apologies." "Sit." She sat. Verena set down her pen with deliberate precision. "The Ashfords are arriving tomorrow. The Chesterfields the day after. We'll have a full house for Christmas, and I expect you to conduct yourself appropriately. Of course, that means no lingering in corners, no awkward silences, no reminding everyone of your situation." Verena's gaze was sharp enough to draw blood. "You represent this family now, inadequate though you may be. The least you can do is pretend otherwise." The words landed like they always did, precise, measured, designed to wound without leaving visible marks. Seraphina kept her expression neutral. "I understand. Do you?" Verena leaned forward. "Because last Christmas, Margaret Chesterfield asked me directly when we might expect an announcement. Do you know how humiliating it was to explain that after 7 years there's been no progress whatsoever? I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't produce heirs." Verena's voice cut through the apology like winter wind through thin fabric. Rowan was supposed to marry the Hartley girl, beautiful, from impeccable lineage, and built for childbearing. But no, his father insisted on honoring that ridiculous agreement with your family. And now look where we are. Seraphine's hands tightened in her lap. She'd heard variations of this speech for 7 years. The theme never changed. She was the wrong choice, the failed investment, the wife who couldn't perform her singular duty. "I'm doing everything." "Clearly not everything, or we wouldn't be having this conversation." Verena stood, smoothing her skirts with sharp, angry movements. "The Blackthorn line goes back 300 years. 300 years of unbroken succession, and you're the weak link threatening to snap it entirely. Perhaps if Rowan and I—" "Don't!" The word cracked through the room. "Don't you dare suggest this is my nephew's failing. He's done his duty. The fault lies entirely with you." The unfairness of it burned, but Seraphine had long since stopped arguing. What was the point? In Verena's world, in this entire world, a marriage without children was always the woman's fault. It didn't matter that Rowan barely spoke to her. It didn't matter that they lived in separate wings, communicated through servants, and hadn't shared more than necessary pleasantries in years. The blame was hers alone. "The guests will expect to see you together," Verena continued, her tone returning to clipped efficiency. smiling, presenting a united front. Can you manage that at least? Yes. I wonder. Verena moved toward the door, then paused. There's one more thing. Lucien is coming home. The name hit Seraphine like cold water. Lucien Blackthorne, Rowan's younger brother. The one nobody mentioned, the scandal the family had buried beneath layers of deliberate silence. She'd met him exactly once, at her wedding, and he'd been gone within the month. I wasn't aware he'd been invited, Seraphine managed. He wasn't. He invited himself. Apparently 7 years of exile wasn't sufficient to teach him proper deference. Verena's mouth thinned. He arrives tonight. Rowan is displeased. That was an understatement. Rowan was probably furious. His relationship with Lucien had fractured years before Seraphine arrived, over some incident nobody would explain. All she knew was that Lucien's name provoked the only genuine emotion she'd ever seen from her husband, and it was cold, controlled rage. I see, Seraphine said. Stay away from him, Verena warned. Lucien is charming, I'll grant him that, but he's reckless and wholly unsuited to proper society. The last thing we need is you being drawn into whatever disaster he's courting this time. With that, Verena swept from the room, leaving Seraphine alone with the fire and her thoughts. She stood slowly, moving to the window. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft, relentless, burying the gardens beneath white silence. Somewhere in this massive house, Rowan was probably in his study, surrounded by ledgers and estate business, carefully avoiding any space she might occupy. 7 years. 7 years of separate rooms, careful distances, conversations that never ventured beyond weather and household management. 7 years of pretending this was normal, that marriages were supposed to feel like elaborate performances where both parties stayed perpetually off stage. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass. The truth was she barely knew her husband. She knew his routines, his preferences for breakfast, his habit of reading by the fire in the library after dinner. She knew he took his coffee black, that he rode early every morning regardless of weather, that he hated small talk and suffered social obligations with barely concealed impatience. But she didn't know him, not really. She didn't know what made him laugh, if he even could anymore. Didn't know his fears, his regrets, the thoughts that kept him awake at night. They'd been married 7 years, and she couldn't have told you his favorite color. The saddest part? She didn't think he knew those things about her either. They were strangers. Polite, distant strangers, who shared a name and nothing else. My lady? Seraphine turned. A young maid stood in the doorway, looking nervous. The Duke requests your presence in his study. Her stomach tightened. Rowan never requested her presence. Not unless something was wrong or some social obligation required her performance. Thank you, Mary. I'll go now. The walk to Rowan's study felt longer than it should have. Seraphine found herself smoothing her skirts again, checking her hair in the hallway mirrors, trying to prepare for whatever this was. Maybe Verena had already complained to him. Maybe he wanted to lecture her about proper behavior during the holiday gathering. Maybe he just wanted to remind her how thoroughly she'd failed. She knocked. Twice. Soft enough to be respectful, loud enough to be heard. Come. Rowan's study was exactly like him. Dark wood, heavy furniture, everything precise and ordered and devoid of warmth. He sat behind his desk, not looking up from whatever document held his attention. He was 32, tall and lean, with dark hair and darker eyes that rarely showed anything beyond calculated control. He was also, objectively, devastatingly handsome. Not that it mattered. Beauty was easier to ignore when it came wrapped in ice. You wanted to see me? Seraphine kept her voice level. Sit. He still didn't look up. She sat, folding her hands in her lap and waiting. Seconds stretched. The clock on the mantel ticked. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Finally, Rowan set down his pen. Lucien arrives within the hour. Lady Verena mentioned, I want to be clear about expectations. His gaze met hers, cold and direct. My brother's not to be trusted. He's charming, but that charm serves only himself. You're to maintain appropriate distance. Of course. I mean it, Seraphine. He leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Lucien has a talent for finding weakness and exploiting it. He'll be kind to you, attentive even, and it will all be calculated to create discord. The words stung more than they should have. Was she really so transparent? So obviously starved for basic kindness that any scrap of attention would compromise her? I'm not a child, she said quietly. I understand appropriate behavior. Do you? Something flickered in his expression. Doubt, maybe, or frustration. You've been sequestered here for 7 years. You have no idea what someone like Lucien is capable of. And whose fault is that? The words escaped before she could stop them. Seraphine froze, waiting for the reprimand, the cold dismissal, the reminder of her place. But Rowan just looked at her. Really looked, for maybe the first time in months. His expression was unreadable. What exactly are you implying? His voice was dangerously soft. She should back down. Apologize. Return to the safe script they'd been reading from for 7 years. Instead, she met his eyes. I'm implying that I've been buried in this manner with no friends, no family, no purpose beyond waiting to fulfill an obligation I clearly can't achieve. You speak of appropriate behavior, but you've given me nothing to be appropriate for except isolation. Silence. Rowan's jaw tightened. You know why the distance is necessary. Do I? She stood, surprised by her own courage. You've never explained it, not once. We were strangers when we married, and you've made certain we remain strangers since. It's better this way. Better for whom? For both of us. He stood as well, moving toward the window with rigid, controlled movements. Sentiment complicates things. Affection creates expectations that can't be met. This arrangement is cleaner. Cleaner, Seraphine repeated. The word tasted bitter. Is that what you call it? This house feels like a mausoleum, Rowan. We're both just existing in it, waiting for something that might never come. If you're referring to children, I'm referring to everything. The words burst out, louder than intended. Children, yes, but also conversation, companionship, any sense that we're actually married instead of just trapped in the same building. Rowan turned, and for a moment, something raw flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar cold control. We had an agreement, he said. Duty, obligation, the continuation of both our families' names. Nothing more was promised. You're right, Seraphine's voice dropped. Nothing more was promised. How foolish of me to hope otherwise. She moved toward the door. Seraphine. She stopped but didn't turn. Regarding Lucien, Rowan said, his tone carefully neutral again. Please, just stay away from him. It wasn't a command. It was almost a request. Almost vulnerable. Almost. As you wish, Your Grace. She left before he could respond, walking quickly through the corridors until she reached her chambers. Only then, with the door safely closed behind her, did she let her composure crack. 7 years. 7 years of this. Of careful distance and unspoken resentment and a loneliness so profound it had become background noise. She moved to her window, looking out at the snow-covered grounds. Somewhere in the distance, she could see lights approaching. A carriage, probably. Lucien, arriving to upset whatever fragile balance they'd achieved. Part of her was terrified. Verina's warnings, Rowan's tension, everyone seemed convinced that Lucien's presence would bring disaster. But another part of her, a part she usually kept locked away, whispered something dangerous. Maybe disaster was exactly what this frozen house needed. The carriage arrived as dinner preparations were underway. Seraphine watched from her window as Lucien Blackthorne emerged into the snowy courtyard, and even from this distance, she could feel the difference. Where Rowan was rigid control, Lucien was loose energy. He bounded up the steps with the enthusiasm of someone arriving at a party rather than entering hostile territory. His coat was unbuttoned despite the cold, his hat sat at a careless angle, and when a servant moved to take his bag, Lucien clapped the man on the shoulder like they were old friends. He looked up, scanning the manor's windows, and his gaze landed directly on hers. He smiled, bright, genuine, utterly unafraid, and sketched a playful bow. Seraphine stepped back from the window, heart racing for reasons she couldn't quite name. Dinner was going to be interesting. The dining room at Blackthorne Manor could seat 40 comfortably. Tonight, there were only 4. Rowan at the head of the table, Verina to his right, Seraphine to his left, and Lucien across from her, radiating amusement at the absurdity of so much space for so few people. Well, Lucian said, accepting wine from a servant with a gracious nod. Isn't this cozy? Rowan's knuckles whitened around his fork. Must you mock everything? I wasn't mocking. I genuinely find this cozy. Intimate, even. Just family, breaking bread together. Lucian's smile was sharp. Though I suppose together is generous, given the distance between each place setting. What is this, 20 feet? Could probably fit another brother between us. Oh wait, I'm the only one you've got. Lucien, Verena warned. Aunt Verena, lovely to see you haven't changed. Still radiating warmth and maternal affection, I see. Verena's expression could have frozen water. Your impertinence hasn't improved with age. Impertinence is just honesty with flair. Lucien turned his attention to Seraphine, and his expression softened genuinely. Lady Seraphine, you're looking well, though I imagine that's despite this place rather than because of it. She started. She's fine, Rowan cut in, and you'll address her with proper respect. I was being respectful. I was also being honest, which apparently counts as disrespect in this house. Lucien took a sip of wine. Tell me, Seraphine, may I call you Seraphine? Lady Seraphine feels so formal for family. How have you been? Truly? Every eye at the table turned to her. This was a test, though of what, she wasn't entirely sure. I've been well, thank you. The safe answer, the expected answer. Lucien studied her with unsettling perception. Have you? That's good. I worried sometimes. 7 years is a long time to be locked away in a manor where the walls have better social lives than the occupants. That's enough, Rowan said, voice dropping to dangerous levels. Is it? Lucien leaned back in his chair, utterly relaxed despite the tension. I've been gone 7 years, brother. 7 years of exile for the crime of telling the truth. You'd think I'd earned the right to speak freely for at least one dinner. You earned nothing. Your presence here is an intrusion, tolerated only because of blood. How fortunate I've got so much of it, then. Lucian's smile never wavered. And speaking of blood, how goes the great Blackthorn succession? Any announcements I should prepare toasts for? The silence that fell was absolute. Verena's face went white with rage. Rowan's hand clenched so hard around his wine glass that Seraphine genuinely feared it might shatter. And Seraphine herself felt the familiar shame rising, hot and suffocating. You go too far, Verena hissed. Do I? Or am I the only one willing to acknowledge the elephant crushing this family beneath its weight? Lucian looked around the table. 7 years. 7 years of a marriage that exists only on paper, of separate wings and careful distances, and everyone pretending this is normal. It's not normal. It's a tragedy dressed up as propriety. You know nothing about our marriage, Rowan said, each word carefully controlled. I know you're killing each other slowly. I know Seraphine looks like she's forgotten how to breathe, and you've turned yourself into a marble statue pretending to be a man. Lucian's voice gentled. I know this house is eating both of you alive, and everyone's too afraid of scandal to admit it. Seraphine found her voice. Perhaps some things are better left private. Private? Lucian laughed, but it sounded sad. Seraphine, privacy implies choice. This isn't private. This is burial. Rowan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against floor. If you cannot conduct yourself appropriately, you can leave. I've been gone 7 years, Rowan. That didn't fix anything. Lucien stood as well, meeting his brother's glare without flinching. I'm here because someone needs to care enough to tell the truth, even if it makes everyone uncomfortable. Your truth is cruelty dressed as concern. No. Cruelty is watching you waste away in this frozen house and saying nothing because it's polite. Lucien moved toward the door, then paused. I'll be in the East Wing if anyone wants an actual conversation instead of this performance. Seraphine, you're welcome any time. No judgment, no expectations, just honesty. He left. The remaining 3 sat in crushing silence. A servant approached cautiously to clear dishes, moving with the careful quiet of someone trying not to provoke wild animals. Finally, Verena spoke. I warned you about him. Yes, Seraphine said softly. You did. But as she excused herself and retreated to her chambers, she couldn't stop thinking about Lucien's words. This house is eating both of you alive. And the terrible part? He was right. Seraphine didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed, staring at the canopy above, while wind howled against the windows and Lucien's words circled her mind like wolves. This house is eating both of you alive. She'd spent 7 years convincing herself this was normal, that all aristocratic marriages were like this, cold, transactional, built on duty rather than affection. She'd told herself that wanting more was childish, that the girlish dreams she'd brought to Blackthorn Manor had been naive fantasies that needed to die. But Lucien had looked at her across that dinner table with something she hadn't seen in so long she'd almost forgotten it existed. Genuine concern. Not pity, not judgment, just care. It terrified her. At dawn, she gave up on sleep and dressed herself without ringing for her maid. The corridors were still dark, lit only by the gray light filtering through frost-covered windows. She moved quietly, not wanting to wake the household, needing a few moments before the performance of the day began. The library was her refuge. Rowan used it in the evenings, but mornings were hers. The only space in this entire manor that felt like it might belong to her, even temporarily. Except this morning, she wasn't alone. Lucien sat in one of the chairs by the fire, still dressed in yesterday's clothes. A book open in his lap and a mostly empty brandy glass on the side table. He looked up when she entered, and his smile was tired but genuine. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She should leave. Rowan's warning echoed in her mind. Verina's sharp instructions. Every rule of propriety demanded she turn around immediately. Instead, she stepped inside and closed the door. "I didn't expect to find anyone here," she said carefully. "I can leave if you'd prefer. This is your territory, after all." He made to stand, but she raised a hand. "No, stay, please." The word surprised them both. Lucien settled back into his chair, watching her with that unsettling perception. "You look exhausted." "I could say the same about you." "Yes, but I've earned my exhaustion through years of poor decisions and excellent wine. You've earned yours through something far worse. Endurance." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, unless standing is part of the Blackthorn training regimen. Wouldn't surprise me at this point." Despite herself, Seraphine almost smiled. She sat, folding her hands in her lap out of habit. "I owe you an apology," Lucien said after a moment. "Last night, I was cruel. You were honest. Honesty without kindness is just cruelty with better publicity." He rubbed his face, looking every bit as tired as she felt. "I told myself I was coming here to help, but maybe I just wanted to stir things up, prove I was right about how broken everything is." "Were you wrong?" The question hung between them. "No," Lucien said quietly. "I wasn't wrong. But being right doesn't mean I wasn't also being an ass." This time, Seraphine did smile. Just a little. "Your aunt would faint if she heard you use such language in front of me." "My aunt would faint if she heard me breathe too loudly." Verina's entire existence is one long exercise in finding things to be appalled by. He picked up his brandy glass, realized it was empty, and set it down again. "Tell me something, and you can tell me it's none of my business if you want. You'd be right, but I'm going to ask anyway." "All right. Are you happy here?" Such a simple question, such an impossible answer. Seraphine looked at the fire, watching flames dance across logs that would burn themselves to ash by noon. "I don't think happiness is the point." "Then what is?" "Duty, family, continuation of the bloodline." The words tasted like ash. "The things that matter. And what you want doesn't matter. What I want is irrelevant." "That's not an answer. That's what they've taught you to say." Lucien leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Seraphine, I barely know you. We met once, 7 years ago, and you were terrified. Now you're, I don't know, buried. Like someone took everything that made you yourself and locked it away where it couldn't cause trouble." "You're being dramatic." "Am I? When's the last time you laughed? Really laughed. Not that polite sound you make at dinner parties to show you're paying attention." She opened her mouth, closed it, couldn't remember. "When's the last time you made a choice just because you wanted to?" he pressed. "Not because it was expected or proper or wouldn't upset the household, but because it brought you joy." "That's not how life works. It's not how life works here. There's a difference." He stood, moving to the window. Snow was falling again, thick and relentless. "I left because I couldn't breathe in this house. Every room has rules. Every conversation has a script. You're not allowed to be human, just this carefully constructed performance of what Blackthorn means. And what does it mean? Control. Perfection. Emotional constipation dressed up as dignity. He turned to face her. Rowan's the worst of them. He's so terrified of feeling anything that he's turned himself into exactly what our father was, cold, distant, measuring everything by duty and nothing by heart. He's trying to protect the family legacy. He's trying to protect himself, and he's destroying you in the process. The words hit harder than they should have. Seraphine stood, needing distance. You don't know anything about our marriage. I know he leaves you alone in a house that treats you like a failed investment. I know you've spent 7 years trying to make yourself smaller, quieter, less of a problem. Lucien's voice gentled. I know you deserve better than being someone's obligation. Stop. Her voice cracked. Please stop. Why? Because it's uncomfortable? Because it's easier to pretend everything's fine? Because it doesn't help. The words burst out louder than intended. You're right, Lucien, about all of it. This house is suffocating me. My marriage is a performance. I've spent 7 years disappearing piece by piece until I don't even recognize myself anymore. You're absolutely right, and it doesn't matter. How can you say that? Because there's no alternative. I can't leave. I can't divorce him. The scandal would destroy both our families. I can't even complain without being reminded that I'm the failure here. That if I'd just done my duty and provided an heir, none of this would be necessary. She was trembling now, years of suppressed frustration finally breaking through. So yes, you're right. And it changes nothing. Lucien crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. He didn't touch her, but his presence was solid, grounding. It changes everything, because now you've admitted it. Now it's real instead of just this thing everyone pretends isn't happening. And what good does that do? I don't know yet, but it's better than slowly dying in silence. The library door opened. Rowan stood in the doorway, still in his riding clothes, snow dusting his shoulders. His gaze moved from Lucien to Seraphine and back again, and his expression went carefully blank. I thought I made myself clear, he said, voice dangerously soft. You did, Lucien replied. I'm just not very good at following orders. Family trait, apparently. Get out. We were just talking. I don't care what you were doing. I want you out of this room. Now. Lucien looked at Seraphine, a question in his eyes. She gave the smallest shake of her head. He nodded and moved toward the door, pausing next to his brother. She deserves better than this, he said quietly. She deserves to be left alone by people who only cause trouble. Rowan's jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. Go, before I have you removed from the estate entirely. Lucien left without another word. The silence that followed felt like suffocation. Rowan closed the door and turned to face her. I asked you to stay away from him. He was already here when I arrived. Then you should have left. It's a library, Rowan. We were reading. You were doing more than reading. I heard you from the hallway. Heat flooded her cheeks, embarrassment mixed with anger. You were listening? I was concerned. Apparently with good reason. He moved closer, and Seraphine had to fight the urge to step back. Lucien is dangerous. Not in obvious ways, but in subtle ones. He makes you think you deserve more than you have, that the rules don't apply, that feelings matter more than duty. And do they? The question stopped him. What? Do feelings matter more than duty? She met his gaze directly. Or are we supposed to just endure everything? Forever? Until we're both dead inside and it doesn't matter anymore? This isn't about feelings. This is about him manipulating you. He's not manipulating me. He's being kind. There's a difference. Kindness is often the first step toward manipulation. Or maybe kindness is just kindness, and you're so unused to it you can't recognize it anymore. Her voice rose despite her best efforts. Not everything is a strategy, Rowan. Not everything is about control and appearances and maintaining perfect Blackthorn propriety. In this family, everything is about those things. Then maybe this family is broken. The words echoed through the library. Rowan stared at her like she'd slapped him. You don't mean that, he said finally. Don't I? She was shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. Look at us. Look at this house. Your aunt treats me like a defective broodmare. The servants pity me. You can barely stand to be in the same room as me unless social obligation demands it. And we're all just supposed to pretend this is normal? It is normal. Aristocratic marriages are built on alliance and duty, not sentiment. I'm not asking for romance, Rowan. I'm not even asking for love. I'm asking for basic human decency. Conversation. Acknowledgement that I exist for reasons beyond continuing your bloodline. He turned away, shoulders rigid. This is what Lucian does. He comes in, says pretty words about feelings and happiness, and everything falls apart. Maybe it needed to fall apart. Maybe we've been holding together something that should have broken years ago. Is that what you want? He turned back, and there was something raw in his expression. Not quite pain, but close. To break this completely? End the marriage? Scandalize both families and destroy everything our parents built? I don't know what I want anymore. The admission hurt. I spent 7 years trying to be the perfect Duchess. Quiet, obedient, invisible when necessary. And it wasn't enough. It's never going to be enough, because the one thing you actually need from me is the one thing I apparently can't provide. Seraphine say, "No, let me finish." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the fire. I know I've failed you. I know the entire point of our marriage was children, and I haven't given you any. I know that makes me worthless in everyone's eyes, including yours. But I'm tired of apologizing for it. I'm tired of making myself smaller. I'm tired of existing in this house like a ghost no one wants to acknowledge. You're not worthless. The words were so quiet she almost missed them. What? Rowan's hands clenched at his sides. You're not worthless. The lack of children it's not your fault. She laughed, bitter. Everyone else seems to think it is. Everyone else is wrong. Then whose fault is it, Rowan? Because someone has to be blamed, and it's certainly not you. The great Duke Blackthorn, perfect in every way. It must be the wife who's broken. I'm not perfect. The admission seemed to cost him something. Far from it. Then why do you act like you are? Why do you hold yourself so rigidly you might shatter? Because if I don't, everything falls apart. The vulnerability in his voice startled her. For the first time in 7 years, she was seeing something beyond the careful control, the aristocratic mask. Something human. What are you so afraid of? She asked softly. He didn't answer, just turned back to the window, watching snow fall across the frozen grounds. The moment stretched. Seraphine waited, hoping he might actually answer, might give her something real instead of the usual deflections. But when he spoke, his voice had returned to that familiar, distant tone. The Ashfords arrived this afternoon. Please be ready to receive them appropriately. And just like that, the walls were back up. Seraphine felt something inside her crack, not break. She'd been breaking slowly for years, but crack in a way that couldn't be ignored anymore. Of course, Your Grace, she said, and the formality was deliberate. Will there be anything else? He flinched, barely perceptible, but she saw it. No, that's all. She left before the tears could start, made it halfway to her chambers before she had to stop, one hand braced against the wall, breathing hard. 7 years. 7 years of this. And for a moment, just one moment, she'd thought maybe something might change. She'd been wrong. The guests arrived in waves throughout the afternoon. The Ashfords first, loud and jovial, treating Blackthorn Manor like a country retreat rather than the mausoleum it actually was. Then the Chesterfields, Margaret eyeing Seraphine with barely concealed pity and curiosity. More followed, cousins, business associates, society friends who came for the spectacle of Christmas at Blackthorn and stayed for the gossip. Seraphine played her role perfectly. She smiled. She made polite conversation. She stood next to Rowan in the receiving line and pretended they were actually a couple instead of two people bound by law and nothing else. Lucian watched it all with dark amusement from the margins. He'd changed into proper evening clothes, cleaned up and charming, but there was an edge to him, like he was waiting for something to break. Dinner was a production. 24 people spread across the dining table, multiple courses, servants moving with choreographed precision. Verena presided over it all like a general commanding troops, ensuring every detail was perfect, every conversation appropriate. Seraphine sat between Lord Ashford, who spent the entire meal discussing his hunting exploits, and young Thomas Chesterfield, who was 22 and kept blushing whenever she spoke to him. Across the table, Rowan engaged in careful political discussion with several investors. He looked relaxed, engaged, more animated than she'd seen him in months. It hurt, realizing he could be warm with strangers, but not with her. "You're looking lovely this evening, Lady Blackthorn," Margaret Chesterfield said from down the table, her voice carrying, "That dress is exquisite." "Thank you." Seraphine smoothed the silk. It was exquisite. Dark green with intricate beading, probably worth more than some families made in a year. She wore it like armor. "Green suits you. Though I confess, I'm surprised we haven't seen you in lighter colors. Pastels, perhaps." Margaret's smile was sharp. "They say expectant mothers often favor softer shades." The implication was clear. The entire table went quiet, waiting for Seraphine's response. Before she could answer, Lucy Yen's voice cut through the tension. "I've always thought fashion advice from non-experts is like medical advice from poets. Well-intentioned, but fundamentally useless. Seraphine looks stunning in that dress precisely because it's bold. Pastels would wash her out entirely." Margaret's smile tightened. "I wasn't aware you had such strong opinions about ladies' fashion, Mr. Blackthorn." "I have strong opinions about most things. It's one of my more charming flaws." He raised his glass. "To bold choices, and the women brave enough to make them." A few people laughed uncertainly. Verena looked ready to murder someone, and Rowan's knuckles were white around his wine glass. But Seraphine felt something unexpected: gratitude. After dinner, the men retired to the smoking room while the women gathered in the drawing room for tea and carefully coded gossip. Seraphine endured an hour of Margaret's pointed questions and Verena's meaningful looks before excusing herself with a headache. She escaped to the conservatory instead of her chambers, needing glass and plants and the illusion of space. Snow pressed against the windows, turning the outside world into abstract whiteness. Inside, tropical plants her predecessor had imported created a jungle of green amid all that white. "Hiding?" She turned to find Lucien in the doorway, jacket discarded, tie loosened. He looked more relaxed than anyone had a right to be in this house. "Shouldn't you be with the men, drinking port and discussing politics?" "I lasted about 15 minutes before Lord Ashford started explaining why the poor are poor because they lack moral character. Had to leave before I said something regrettable." He moved into the conservatory, examining a particularly exotic orchid. "How was the lady's gauntlet?" "About as pleasant as you'd imagine." "Margaret Chesterfield still fishing for scandal?" "She practically has a net out." Lucien laughed. "She's been trying to catch one in this family for a decade. Unfortunately for her, we're all either too boring or too careful to give her anything useful." "Until you arrived." "Oh, I'm definitely giving her material. The prodigal brother returns after 7 years. She's probably already composing letters to her friends." He sat on one of the stone benches, patting the space beside him. "Come, sit. You look exhausted." She should refuse. Return to her chambers, maintain proper distance, follow all the rules she'd been following for 7 years. Instead, she sat. "Thank you," she said after a moment, "for what you said at dinner about the dress. I meant it. Margaret was being a vicious cat, and someone needed to put her in her place. Rowan looked ready to strangle you." "Rowan always looks ready to strangle me. It's his resting expression when I'm around." Lucien stretched his legs out, looking up at the glass ceiling where snow was accumulating. "We used to be close, you know, before everything fell apart." "What happened?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I told him a truth he didn't want to hear, about our father, about what this family demands, about the cost of being a Blackthorn. He chose the family. I chose honesty, and here we are, him in his frozen castle, me in exile, both of us damaged in different ways." "Do you regret it? The honesty?" "Every day, and not at all." He looked at her. "Does that make sense?" "More than you'd think." They sat in companionable silence, listening to snowfall and plants breathe. It was the most peaceful Seraphine had felt in years. "Can I ask you something?" Lucien said eventually, "and you can tell me it's none of my business." "You'll ask anyway." "True, but I'm trying to be polite." He shifted to face her more directly. "Do you love him, Rowan?" The question shouldn't have surprised her, but it did. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I thought I might once. When we first married, I thought maybe we'd grow to care for each other. But he kept his distance from the start, and I learned to keep mine. Now, I don't know what I feel. Resentment, mostly. Loneliness. Sometimes anger. But not love. How can you love someone you don't know?" "You can't," Lucien said quietly. And that's the tragedy of it. Rowan's so busy protecting himself, he doesn't realize what he's lost. I don't think he's lost anything. I don't think he ever wanted it in the first place. You're wrong about that. She turned to look at him. What do you mean? Rowan wanted love, desperately. When we were children, before our father crushed it out of him, he was warm, affectionate. He cried when our mother died, sobbed so hard he made himself sick. And our father beat him for it. Said blackthorns don't show weakness, that tears were for women and weaklings. Seraphine's chest tightened. That's horrible. It was, and it worked. Rowan learned to lock everything away. By the time he was 15, he was exactly what father wanted, controlled, emotionless, perfect. But the want didn't go away. He just buried it so deep he convinced himself it didn't exist. How do you know? Because I watched it happen. Because I was there the night before your wedding, and he was terrified. Not of marriage, but of failing you, of becoming exactly like father, cold and distant and incapable of giving you what you deserved. He told you that? He was drunk. We both were. It was the last real conversation we had before Lucian trailed off. Before I ruined everything by being honest. What did you say to him? That he didn't have to be like father, that he could choose differently, build a marriage based on partnership instead of duty. That vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was the only thing that made any of this worthwhile. Lucian's smile was bitter. He told me I was naive, that I didn't understand what it meant to carry the Blackthorn name. We fought. I left. And he married you the next day, already locked away behind walls I couldn't reach anymore. Seraphine processed this, trying to reconcile the terrified groom Lucian described with the cold, distant man she'd lived with for 7 years. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know it's not about you. The distance, the coldness, it's not because you're lacking anything. It's because he's broken in ways he won't admit. Lucienne met her eyes. And because I think maybe you might be able to reach him when no one else can. I've tried for 7 years. Have you? Or have you been trying to be what you think he wants? Quiet, obedient, perfect? When's the last time you pushed back? Demanded more? Refused to accept the scraps he's offering? This morning, in the library. And nothing changed. He shut down. Went back to being the Duke instead of being human. Then you push harder. You keep pushing until he either breaks down those walls or admits he's choosing them over you. And if he chooses the walls, then at least you'll know, and you can stop wasting your life waiting for something that's never going to come. The brutality of it stole her breath, but there was a terrible kindness in it too, the kindness of honesty. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of finding out you're right, that he'll choose the walls, that I've spent 7 years loving someone who's incapable of loving me back. Oh, Seraphine, Lucienne's voice was gentle. You don't love him. You love who you hoped he might become. There's a difference. Was there? She didn't know anymore. They sat in silence until the conservatory grew cold and the snow outside had buried everything in white. When Lucien finally stood to leave, he paused. For what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary. And whatever happens with Rowan, whatever you decide, you deserve someone who sees that. He left before she could respond. Seraphine stayed in the conservatory long after he'd gone, watching snow fall and wondering when her life had become something that required such careful navigation. When had she become so afraid of her own wants that she'd stopped having them entirely? Lucien was right. She'd spent 7 years trying to be perfect, and it had gotten her nowhere. Maybe it was time to try something different. Maybe it was time to stop being quiet. The next morning brought more guests and more performance. Seraphine went through the motions: breakfast, morning calls, polite conversation. But something had shifted inside her. She caught herself speaking more freely, laughing at jokes she might have ignored before, meeting people's eyes instead of looking away. Verena noticed. You seem different today. Do I? Yes. Less. Verena searched for the word. Subdued. I trust this doesn't have anything to do with Lucien's continued presence. Why would it? Because he has a talent for encouraging people to make poor decisions. I've seen it before. What if they're not poor decisions? Seraphine heard herself say. What if they're just different from what you'd choose? Verena's eyes narrowed. Be careful, Seraphine. There's a difference between confidence and insolence.
Is there? Or is that just what we tell women when they stop accepting less than they deserve? She walked away before Verena could respond, heart pounding. That was new. Talking back. Refusing to absorb criticism without question. It felt dangerous. It felt good. Rowan found her in the afternoon, reading in the library. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before speaking. "We need to talk," he said. "All right." He closed the door behind him, and Seraphine realized this was the first time they'd been alone since their argument yesterday. He looked tired, uncertain, human almost. "Verena says you've been different today. Have I?" "Don't." He moved closer. "Don't do that. Don't play games." "I'm not playing anything. I'm just existing." Apparently that's now considered problematic. "It's not about existing. It's about—" He struggled with the words. "You're changing. Because of Lucien. Or maybe I'm just finally becoming myself. The version of me I buried 7 years ago to try and be what you wanted. I never asked you to bury anything. You didn't have to ask. Your silence was loud enough." Rowan flinched. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Be open, vulnerable, whatever it is you need from me." His hands clenched. "I was raised to believe emotions were weakness, that control was everything. And I've spent my entire life building those defenses because without them, I don't know who I am." "Then maybe it's time to find out. What if there's nothing underneath? What if I tear down the walls and there's just emptiness?" The fear in his voice was real, raw. Seraphine stood, moving closer. "Then we'd both know the truth. And we could stop pretending. I don't want to lose you." The admission hung between them, fragile and unexpected. "You never had me," she said quietly. "Not really. How can you lose something you never tried to keep?" "I know." His voice broke. "I know, and I don't know how to fix it." For the first time in 7 years, they were having a real conversation. Not about household management or social obligations, but about them. About the broken thing they'd become. "Maybe you can't," Seraphine said. "Maybe we're too far gone." "Is that what you believe?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." They stood there, closer than they'd been in years, but still impossibly far apart. Rowan raised his hand like he might touch her face, then dropped it. "I'm trying," he said. "I know it doesn't look like it. I know I'm failing spectacularly, but I'm trying. Try harder." The words came out sharper than intended, but she didn't soften them. Because Lucien was right. She'd spent 7 years accepting scraps. Maybe it was time to demand the full meal or walk away hungry. Rowan nodded slowly. "I will, I promise. We'll see." She left him there, standing in the library with promises neither of them knew if he could keep. The days leading to Christmas Eve crawled by with agonizing slowness. The manor filled with more guests, more performances, more elaborate dinners where Seraphine smiled until her face ached and Rowan played the perfect host while avoiding her eyes. They existed in the same spaces but occupied different worlds, circling each other like planets that had lost their gravitational pull. Lucien watched it all with increasing frustration. He'd started making pointed comments at meals, small provocations designed to crack the facade. Verena responded by seating him at the far end of the table, as far from Seraphine as possible, which only made his interventions louder. "Lovely weather we're having," he announced at lunch 3 days before Christmas. "Perfect for outdoor activities, long walks, private conversations, the sort of thing married couples might enjoy together." The silence that followed was deafening. "The weather is hardly suitable for walks," Verena said sharply. "It's been snowing constantly." "Strange. I saw Lord and Lady Ashford walking the grounds just this morning. They seemed quite content." Lucien's smile was innocent. "Of course, they've only been married 2 years. Perhaps the novelty hasn't worn off yet." Rowan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Seraphine focused on her soup, feeling the weight of everyone's attention. Margaret Chesterfield leaned forward, scenting blood. "How long have you and the Duke been married now, Lady Blackthorne?" "I keep losing track." 7 years, Seraphine said quietly. 7 years? My goodness, time does fly.
Margaret's smile was razor sharp. And still no little ones running about. You must be so disappointed. The cruelty was breathtaking. Seraphine felt her chest constrict, the familiar shame rising like floodwater. But then something unexpected happened. Actually, she heard herself say, I find I'm more disappointed by the lack of basic manners and supposedly refined company. The table went silent. Margaret's face flushed red. I beg your pardon? My reproductive status is hardly appropriate dinner conversation, Mrs. Chesterfield. Perhaps we could discuss something less invasive. Your digestion, for instance. Or your husband's gambling debts. I hear they're quite substantial. Lucien nearly choked on his wine. Several guests looked scandalized. Verena appeared ready to combust. And Rowan, for the first time in days, looked directly at her. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or approval. Margaret stood abruptly. I will not sit here and be insulted by someone pointing out your rudeness? Seraphine set down her spoon with deliberate calm. How uncomfortable for you. Imagine how I've felt enduring your commentary for 7 years. Rowan, are you going to allow your wife to speak this way? All eyes turned to the Duke. He was silent for a long moment, and Seraphine felt her brief courage falter. He'd side with Margaret, with propriety, with the rules that governed this frozen house. Mrs. Chesterfield, Rowan said finally, his voice cold, my wife is correct. Your behavior has been inappropriate. If you cannot conduct yourself with proper respect, perhaps you should take your meals in your chambers. Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Then she swept from the room, her husband hurrying after her with apologetic murmurs. The remaining guests returned to their food with newfound intensity, suddenly fascinated by their plates. Lucien raised his glass slightly in Seraphine's direction, his smile genuine. She didn't return it, but she felt something warm in her chest, something that might have been pride. After lunch, as guests dispersed to various activities, Rowan caught her arm in the hallway. His touch was tentative, like he'd forgotten how. That was, he started, then seemed to lose the words. Inappropriate, she offered. Scandalous? Unbecoming of a duchess? Magnificent. The word stunned her into silence. Rowan's hand dropped from her arm. I should have defended you years ago. From Margaret, from Verena, from all of them. I'm sorry. Apologies don't change anything. I know, but I'm offering one anyway. He looked at her properly, really looked, and she saw exhaustion in his eyes. You've been miserable here. I've made you miserable, and I don't know how to fix it, but I'm trying to figure it out. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, nothing's changed except you're marginally more aware of how broken everything is. What do you want from me? The question came out frustrated, almost desperate. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. That's the problem, Rowan. I can't tell you. You have to want it yourself. You have to decide that our marriage is worth fighting for, not because I demanded it or Lucien provoked you, but because you actually want it. I do want it. Then show me. Not with words, with actions, with actual change. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I'm not asking for grand gestures. I'm asking for you to be present, to talk to me like I'm a person instead of an obligation, to treat our marriage like it matters. It does matter. Then act like it. She walked away before he could respond, before the familiar pattern could reassert itself. Him making vague promises, her accepting them, both of them returning to their separate corners until the next crisis forced another uncomfortable conversation. She was done with that pattern. The conservatory had become her refuge. She spent the afternoon there, reading without absorbing a single word, watching snow accumulate against the glass. The tropical plants seemed obscene in all that winter. Too green, too alive, too insistent on existing despite the cold trying to crush them. She understood the feeling. You're avoiding me. Seraphine looked up to find Lucien in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking unusually serious. I'm avoiding everyone. Fair enough. He entered anyway, settling onto his usual bench. That was quite the performance at lunch. I was proud. It was foolish. Now Margaret will spread it across half of England. Let her. Better to be talked about for having a spine than pitied for lacking one. He studied her face. You look tired. I am tired, exhausted, actually, of all of this. Then leave.
The suggestion was so simple, so impossible, that she almost laughed. And go where? Do what? I have no money of my own. No family who'd take me in without dragging both houses through scandal. Divorce isn't an option. I'm trapped here, Lucian. We both know it. You're trapped by choice. There's a difference. Is there? When all the choices lead to the same place? They don't, though. You could leave anyway. Scandal be damned. Live quietly somewhere. Start over. He leaned forward. I'd help you. Financially, logistically, whatever you needed. Why would you do that? Because watching you die slowly in this house is unbearable. Because my brother is too broken to save you and too proud to let you go. Because someone should give you an actual choice instead of just different versions of imprisonment. The offer was genuine. Tempting, even. She could leave. Disappear. Become someone new somewhere far from Blackthorn Manor and its suffocating expectations. But even as she thought it, she knew she wouldn't. I can't, she said quietly. Can't or won't. Both. Neither. I don't know anymore. She set down her book. Part of me wants to run, but another part keeps thinking maybe things could change. Maybe if I push hard enough, demand enough, refuse to settle, maybe Rowan will actually hear me. And if he doesn't? Then at least I'll know I tried everything before I gave up. Lucian nodded slowly. You're braver than I gave you credit for. I'm not brave. I'm just stubborn. Same thing, usually. He stood, moving to examine a particularly exotic orchid. Can I tell you something about Rowan? I'm not sure I want to hear it. Hey, that's fair. But I'm going to say it anyway. He turned to face her. When we were teenagers, there was a housemaid. Emma. She was kind, pretty, completely inappropriate by Blackthorn standards. Rowan fell for her hard. Used to sneak down to the kitchens just to talk to her. He was happy, Seraphine. Genuinely happy for the first time since our mother died. What happened? Father found out. Had Emma dismissed immediately, told Rowan that Blackthorns don't form attachments with servants, that his feelings were shameful and needed to be controlled. Then he beat him. Not for sneaking out or breaking rules, but for daring to feel something real. Seraphine's stomach turned. That's monstrous. That's our father, and that's when Rowan learned the lesson he's been living by ever since, that love is dangerous. That feeling anything makes you vulnerable. That the only way to survive is to lock everything away. Lucien's voice was gentle. I'm not saying this to excuse him. I'm saying it so you understand what you're fighting against. It's not just stubbornness or pride. It's decades of conditioning that taught him emotions are weaknesses to be eliminated.
Then maybe he can't change. Maybe he's too damaged. Maybe. Or maybe he just needs someone who refuses to let him hide. Lucien met her eyes. That was quite the moment at lunch, when you stood up for yourself and he backed you instead of propriety. That's the brother I used to know, the one who existed before Father crushed him. One moment doesn't make a pattern. No, but it's a start. He left her with that thought, and Seraphine sat in the conservatory until the light faded and servants came to light the lamps. Christmas Eve was tomorrow. The house would be full of festivities and obligations and performances, and somewhere in all of that, she'd have to decide whether to keep fighting for a marriage that might already be dead. That night, she dreamed. In the dream, she walked through endless corridors of Blackthorn Manor, each one longer than the last. Doors lined the walls, all of them locked. She tried each one, desperate to find a way out, but they wouldn't budge. Her hands were bleeding from trying to force them open, leaving red smears on white wood. Then she heard her name. Seraphine. She turned, but the corridor was empty. Seraphine. Louder this time. Rowan's voice, but different somehow. Raw, desperate. She followed the sound. Running now, her dress catching on corners, her breath coming in gasps. The corridors twisted, impossible architecture that made no sense. But the voice kept calling, getting closer. Finally, she found a door that wasn't locked. It opened into a chamber she didn't recognize. Dark, cold, filled with shadows. And in the center, barely visible, was Rowan. But he was different. Younger, maybe. Less guarded. You can't leave, he said, and his voice broke. If you leave, there's nothing left. Then give me a reason to stay. I don't know how. She reached for him, but he dissolved into shadows, and she was falling. Seraphine woke with a gasp, tangled in sheets, heart pounding. The room was dark except for dying embers in the fireplace.
She lay there, trying to calm her breathing, trying to separate dream from reality. But the voice had been so real, the desperation in it. She got out of bed, pulling on a robe against the cold. The manor was silent at this hour, everyone asleep in their chambers. She should go back to bed. Morning would come soon enough with all its demands. Instead, she found herself in the hallway, moving through darkness toward the east wing, toward Rowan's chambers. She'd never been there before. In 7 years of marriage, she'd never once crossed the threshold of his private rooms. It felt like violating sacred ground, but her feet kept moving, drawn by something she couldn't name. His door was closed. She stood outside it for a long moment, hand raised to knock, wondering if she'd completely lost her mind. It was the middle of the night. He'd be asleep. This was wildly inappropriate, even by their broken marriage's standards. She knocked anyway. No response. She knocked harder, louder, no longer caring about propriety or what servants might think. Something had broken inside her, some final restraint, and she needed to know. Needed to understand if there was anything worth saving or if she'd been fighting for a ghost. The door opened abruptly. Rowan stood there, half-dressed, hair disheveled, looking startled and concerned. "Seraphine? What's wrong?" "I need to know," she said, and her voice was shaking. "I need to know if you feel anything at all, because I can't do this anymore if there's nothing there. It's the middle of the night. I don't care. I don't care about appropriate hours or proper behavior. I need the truth, Rowan. Not tomorrow, not when you've had time to build your walls back up. Right now." He stared at her, clearly torn between pulling her inside and sending her away. Finally, he stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in, before someone sees you." His chambers were surprisingly sparse. She'd expected opulence, but it was almost monk-like. Dark furniture, minimal decoration, everything ordered and precise. The bed was unmade, sheets twisted like he'd been fighting them. A book lay open on the nightstand, and she saw her name on the page before he quickly closed it. "What is that?" she asked. "Nothing. It's—" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "It's a journal. I've been trying to understand things. About us. Can I see it?" "No." "Why not?" "Because it's private. Because it's filled with thoughts I'm not ready to share." 7 years, Rowan. 7 years of not sharing. When will you be ready?" "I don't know." The admission burst out of him. "I don't know how to be the person you need. I don't know how to tear down these walls without falling apart completely. I don't know how to feel things without it destroying me." "Then maybe you should fall apart," she said. "Maybe that's better than this half-life we're living." "You don't understand. Then help me understand. Tell me what you're so afraid of. Tell me why you'd rather be alone than risk being close to someone." He turned away, shoulders rigid. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer, that he'd shut down again, retreat behind those familiar defenses. But then his voice came, quiet and broken. "Because everyone I've ever loved has left. My mother died when I was 8. The one person who made this house feel safe. Gone. My father blamed me, said if I'd been better, stronger, she wouldn't have gotten sick trying to birth another child. Then there was Emma, the girl Lucien told you about. I thought maybe I could find something real with her. Father destroyed that. Destroyed her. She left without even saying goodbye. Rowan, and then there's you." He turned back and his eyes were wet. "You married me expecting a partnership, maybe even affection eventually, and I've given you nothing. I've watched you wither in this house, watched the light go out of your eyes, and I couldn't fix it because fixing it meant risking something I couldn't afford to lose." "What?" "My control, my certainty, the walls that keep me functional." His voice cracked. "If I let you in, really in, and you still left, it would break something in me that can't be repaired. So I kept my distance, told myself it was better this way, that you'd be happier with indifference than with my mess." "That's not your choice to make," Seraphine said, surprised by her own steadiness. "You don't get to decide what I can handle. You don't get to protect me from yourself by making me miserable." I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it, the distance, the coldness, making you feel like you weren't enough when you've always been more than I deserved." The apology was real, raw, everything she'd wanted to hear for 7 years, and it wasn't enough. "Sorry doesn't fix this," she said, Sorry is just words. I need to know if you're actually capable of change, or if this is just another moment of vulnerability you'll lock away tomorrow.
I don't know, he said honestly. I don't know if I can be what you need, but I want to try. I want to be someone who can stand in the same room as you without armor. Someone who can tell you I'm terrified of losing you without it taking 7 years and your brother's intervention. I'm terrified too, she admitted. Terrified this won't work. Terrified it will. Terrified I've wasted 7 years on something that was broken from the start.
It wasn't broken from the start. I broke it. Me and my cowardice and my father's voice in my head telling me feelings are dangerous. Then prove him wrong. How? Seraphine stepped closer, close enough to see the fear in his eyes matched by something else. Longing, maybe. Hope. Show me you can be vulnerable without falling apart. Show me you can feel something and survive it. Not tomorrow, right now. Seraphine, Tell me one true thing, she interrupted. One thing you've never said. One thing that scares you to admit. He was silent for so long she thought he'd refuse. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it. I dream about you. Every night. In the dreams, we're different people. Married, but actually together. I wake up, and the distance between our chambers feels like a chasm I dug myself, and I don't know how to cross it. Her breath caught. You could cross it, walk down the hallway, knock on my door. And say what? Sorry I've been a coward for 7 years. Would you like to try again? Yes, exactly that. It's not enough. It's a start. They stood in the charged silence, years of distance and hurt compressed into the space between them. Seraphine could feel her heart pounding, could see the war raging behind Rowan's eyes. I'm afraid, he said finally, of being this honest, of admitting I need you when I've spent years pretending I didn't need anyone. I know. I'm afraid too. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away. When he didn't, she took his hand. His fingers were cold, trembling slightly. But maybe being afraid together is better than being safe alone. Is it? His voice was raw. Because right now, standing here with you, I feel like I'm about to break into pieces. Then break. I'll help you put yourself back together. What if the pieces don't fit anymore? Then we'll figure out a new shape. He laughed, but it came out choked. You make it sound simple. It's not. It's probably going to be messy and hard, and we'll fail at it half the time. But it's better than this. She gestured at the space between them, at 7 years of careful avoidance. Better than pretending we don't matter to each other. You matter to me, he said, and the admission seemed to cost him everything. You've always mattered. I just didn't know how to show it without losing myself. Then show me now. Without the walls. Without the fear. Just be honest with me. Rowan pulled his hand from hers, and for a moment she thought she'd pushed too hard, asked for too much. But instead of retreating, he moved to his desk and retrieved the journal he'd been hiding. He held it for a long moment, then handed it to her. This is honesty. Every thought I couldn't say out loud. Every time I wanted to cross that hallway and didn't. Every moment I watched you from across rooms and convinced myself you were better off without my mess. Seraphine took the journal with shaking hands. The leather was worn, well used. She opened to a random page and read, March 14th, 1876. Seraphine wore blue today. It made her eyes look like storm clouds. I wanted to tell her but couldn't find the words. By dinner, she'd changed. I spent the evening wondering if I'd imagined how beautiful she looked, or if I just can't hold on to moments anymore. She turned pages, reading fragments of a man she'd never known existed. July 2nd, 1877. Found her crying in the conservatory. Stood outside the door for 15 minutes trying to work up courage to go in. Left instead. I'm a coward. My father was right about that, at least. December 25th, 1877. Christmas. She smiled at guests all day and looked miserable when she thought no one was watching. I made her miserable. This house, this marriage, me, all of it. Don't know how to fix it. Don't know if I can. Entry after entry, year after year, a chronicle of longing and self-recrimination and chances not taken. You wrote about me, she said, voice unsteady, every day, sometimes multiple times. He wouldn't meet her eyes. I couldn't say it to your face, so I said it to paper. Pathetic,
I know. It's not pathetic. It's heartbreaking. She closed the journal carefully. All this time, I thought you didn't care, that I was just an obligation you tolerated.
You were never just anything. You were everything I wanted and everything I was too afraid to reach for. Past tense? No. He finally looked at her, and his eyes held something raw and desperate. Present tense. Current tense. Every tense. You're still everything I want, and I'm still terrified of ruining it. Then ruin it honestly instead of through neglect. The words hung between them, a challenge and an invitation. Rowan closed the distance between them slowly, like approaching something wild that might bolt. When he raised his hand to her face, his fingers trembled. "If I do this," he said quietly, "if I try to be the husband you deserve, I'm going to fail sometimes. I'm going to retreat into old patterns when things get hard. I'm going to hurt you without meaning to." "I know. And you're still standing here." "I'm still standing here." "Why?" "Because failure is better than not trying. Because 7 years of distance has taught me what I don't want, and I want to find out what I do want. Because I'm tired of being careful." She met his eyes. "And because part of me still believes we could be something real if we both stopped being so afraid." His thumb brushed her cheek, hesitant. "I don't remember how to do this. Be close to someone." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." "Together," he repeated, like testing the word. "I haven't let anyone be close to me in so long." "I know, but I'm asking you to try anyway." He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When their foreheads touched, his breath was unsteady. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Good. Me too." They stood like that, suspended between past and possibility, until Rowan's control finally shattered. He kissed her, desperate and clumsy, and nothing like the perfunctory kiss at their wedding 7 years ago. This was raw need, and 7 years of wanting, and the terrifying vulnerability of letting someone see him broken. Seraphine kissed him back, hands fisting in his shirt, feeling something crack open in her chest. It wasn't romance. It wasn't a magical fix to 7 years of damage. It was messy and real, and tasted like salt because they were both crying. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Rowan pressed his face against her hair. "Don't leave," he whispered. "Please. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking anyway. Stay. Help me figure out how to be better." "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Not tonight, not tomorrow. But Rowan, this can't be another promise you forget by morning." "It won't be. I swear it won't be." He pulled back enough to look at her. "Tomorrow, in front of everyone, I'll show them we're not broken, or if we are, that we're choosing to fix it anyway." "How?" "I don't know yet. But publicly. Undeniably. So I can't retreat into safe distance again. That will cause talk." "Let it. I'm done prioritizing propriety over you." The declaration should have felt dramatic, but it just felt necessary, like something that should have happened 7 years ago finally arriving. They stood together in his chamber as dawn crept toward the windows, neither quite ready to let go, both knowing tomorrow would test every fragile promise they'd just made. But for now, in the quiet before Christmas Eve, they were just two people who'd spent too long apart finally admitting they didn't want to be alone anymore. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to fixed. But it was honest, and that was more than they'd had in 7 years. Seraphine left Rowan's chambers as dawn turned the snow outside from gray to pale gold. She slipped through the hallways like a thief, praying she wouldn't encounter servants already starting their morning routines. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and her lips still felt swollen from kissing, from 7 years of want compressed into a single night. She made it to her own chambers without being seen and collapsed against the closed door, breathing hard. Her hands were shaking. Everything was shaking. What had she done? No, what had they done? The question circled her mind as she changed into a proper dress, as she sat at her vanity and tried to make her face look less like someone who'd spent the night crying and kissing in equal measure. The woman in the mirror looked different somehow, raw, exposed, terrified, because Rowan had promised change, and promises made at 3 in the morning had a way of dissolving in daylight. By breakfast, he might be back to his usual controlled self, and last night would become just another moment filed away in that journal he kept instead of actually living. She couldn't survive that. Not again. A knock at her door made her jump. "My lady?" Mary's voice tentative. "Lady Verena requests your presence for breakfast in half an hour." Seraphine closed her eyes. Of course Verena wanted her early, probably to lecture her about yesterday's outburst at lunch, to remind her that defying Margaret Chesterfield was the beginning of social ruin. "Tell her I'll be there," she called back. She finished with her hair, pinning it into something resembling respectability, and stood. Her reflection showed a woman dressed for battle in morning silk. Appropriate. The breakfast room was already occupied when she arrived. Verena sat at the head of the small table, lips pressed into a thin line. Across from her, looking amused despite the early hour, was Lucien. "Seraphine," Verena said without preamble. "Sit. We need to discuss your behavior." "Good morning to you too, Aunt Verena," Lucien said cheerfully. "Lovely weather we're having, very festive." "Be quiet, Lucien, this doesn't concern you." "Everything in this house concerns me. I'm family. Can't escape it even when I try." He winked at Seraphine as she sat. "You look different this morning, well-rested almost, shocking given the accommodations." Seraphine felt heat rise to her cheeks. Could he tell? Could he see last night written across her face? "I slept fine, thank you." "I'm sure you did." His smile suggested he knew exactly where she'd been, but he'd keep it to himself. For now. Verena set down her teacup with deliberate precision. "Your outburst yesterday was unacceptable. Margaret Chesterfield is a respected member of society, and you embarrassed her in front of everyone." "She embarrassed herself," Seraphine said, surprised by her own steadiness, "by being cruel. She was making conversation. She was being vicious. There's a difference." "The difference is irrelevant. You do not speak to guests that way, regardless of provocation." Verena's eyes were ice. "I've tolerated your presence in this house despite your obvious failings. The least you can do is behave appropriately." "Tolerated my presence?" The words came out sharper than intended. "This is my home. I'm Rowan's wife. You don't tolerate me. I belong here as much as you do." Lucien made a small sound of approval. Verena's face went white with fury. "You belong here only as long as you serve your purpose, which you have spectacularly failed to do for 7 years. She leaned forward. "Do you think Rowan wants you here? He married you out of obligation to your family, nothing more. Without an heir, you're useless to him." The cruelty was breathtaking, but Seraphine found she wasn't crumbling under it the way she used to. Last night had changed something fundamental. "If I'm so useless, why are you so worried about my behavior?" she asked calmly. "Surely an irrelevant failure can't damage the Blackthorn reputation that badly." "You insolent—" "Enough!" Rowan's voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone turned. He stood in the doorway, fully dressed despite the early hour, looking between his aunt and wife with an expression Seraphine couldn't quite read. "Rowan," Verena said, recovering quickly, "I was just explaining to Seraphine the necessity of proper conduct." "I heard what you were explaining, from the hallway." His voice was dangerously soft. "Every word." Verena had the grace to look uncertain. She needed to understand. "She understands perfectly. What you need to understand is that Seraphine is my wife and the lady of this house. You're a guest here, Aunt Verena. A respected one, but still a guest, and guests don't speak to my wife that way." The silence that followed was absolute. Lucien's eyebrows had climbed toward his hairline. Verena looked like she'd been slapped. "I'm family," she said stiffly, "not a guest." "Then act like family," which means treating Seraphine with respect, not contempt. Rowan moved into the room, and Seraphine noticed he positioned himself slightly between her and Verena. Protective. "If you can't do that, you're welcome to take your meals elsewhere." "You cannot be serious." "I've never been more serious." He looked at his aunt with steady, unflinching eyes. "Seraphine has endured enough. From you, from Margaret, from this entire household. It ends now." Verena stood abruptly. "Your father would be ashamed." "My father was cruel and emotionally stunted, and if his approval depends on treating my wife the way he treated my mother, then I'll happily disappoint him." Rowan's voice didn't waver. "Breakfast is over. I need to speak with Seraphine. Alone." Verena swept from the room in a rustle of expensive fabric and wounded pride. Lucien stood more slowly, grinning. "Well," he said, "that was unexpected. In the best possible way." He paused next to Rowan. Proud of you, brother. Only took 7 years, but better late than never. Get out, Lucian. Going. Some of us appreciate the entertainment, you know. He winked at Seraphine on his way past. Merry Christmas Eve, by the way. I suspect it's going to be memorable. Then they were alone. Rowan stood there, hands clenched at his sides, looking like he'd just jumped off a cliff and wasn't sure if he'd survived the landing. I meant what I said last night, he said quietly, about doing this publicly, about not hiding anymore. I heard. Seraphine's voice came out unsteady. That was quite the declaration. Verena will never forgive me. Probably not. The guests will talk. Margaret will spread it across 3 counties by New Year's. Definitely. And I don't care. He moved closer, still tentative, like he was learning a new language. I've spent 7 years carrying what they think more than what you need. I'm done with that. Are you? She needed to know this was real, that daylight hadn't burned away the promises made in darkness. Because standing up to Verena once doesn't undo 7 years of distance. I know. That's why I need to do more. He took her hand and his grip was firm despite the trembling. Today, in front of everyone, I need to show you that I mean it. Rowan, what are you planning? Something reckless. Something that will either fix this or destroy what little reputation we have left. His laugh was shaky. Lucienne would be proud. I'm terrified. Tell me. Tonight, Christmas Eve dinner, in front of all the guests. He met her eyes. Trust me? It was an impossible ask. Trust, after 7 years of disappointment. But something in his expression, fear mixed with determination mixed with hope, made her nod. All right, I trust you. His relief was visible. Thank you. Now we should probably prepare. Today's going to be long. He was right. Christmas Eve at Blackthorn Manor was traditionally an elaborate affair. Morning chapel service, afternoon games and entertainments, formal dinner followed by gift exchange and caroling. Every moment choreographed, every interaction watched and judged. Seraphine went through the motions with mounting anxiety. What was Rowan planning? Every time she caught his eye across rooms throughout the day, he looked equally nervous and resolved. Lucienne watched them both with barely concealed amusement. Verena maintained an icy distance, speaking to Seraphine only when absolutely necessary. The guests noticed the tension. Margaret whispered behind her fan to other ladies. Lord Ashford pulled Rowan aside at one point for what looked like a serious conversation. The younger guests seemed oblivious, but the older ones, the ones who understood the complex social dynamics of aristocratic families, watched everything with predatory interest. By the time evening arrived and everyone assembled for dinner, Seraphine's nerves were scraped raw. She dressed in her finest gown, deep burgundy with gold accents, and tried to calm her racing heart. Mary helped her with the final touches, then paused. My lady, if I may, you look beautiful tonight, truly. Thank you, Mary. And if I may say something else? The young maid hesitated. Whatever happens tonight, the staff are glad to see you standing taller. You deserve to. The unexpected kindness nearly undid her. I appreciate that. We've all seen how hard these years have been. Some of us hoped. Mary trailed off, then straightened. Never mind. Good luck, my lady. Seraphine descended the stairs to find guests already gathering in the drawing room for pre-dinner drinks. The room glittered with candlelight and winter decorations, holly and evergreen, silver and gold, everything calculated to present Blackthorn Manor at its most impressive. She felt like she was walking into an ambush. Rowan found her immediately. He was dressed formally, every inch the aristocratic duke, but his eyes, when they met hers, held something warm, something real. You're stunning, he said quietly. You're terrifying me. Whatever you're planning. Trust me, he repeated. Please. Dinner was announced before she could respond. The procession to the dining room followed strict protocol, rank and precedence determining who walked with whom. Traditionally, Rowan would escort the highest-ranking lady guest, while Seraphine walked with the corresponding gentleman. But tonight, Rowan bypassed Lady Ashford entirely and offered his arm to Seraphine. The room went silent. My lady, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Will you join me? It was a small thing, a gesture. But in this world of rigid rules and careful precedent, it was a declaration. Seraphine took his arm. Of course. They led the procession to the dining room, and she could feel every eye on them, could hear the whispers starting. Lady Ashford looked affronted. Verena's expression could have frozen fire. But Lucienne, walking with Margaret Chesterfield and looking thoroughly entertained, gave them an approving nod. Dinner began with the usual elaborate service, multiple courses, each more extravagant than the last. Conversation flowed around safe topics, weather, hunting, the upcoming London season, but tension hummed beneath it all, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Rowan kept Seraphine's hand under the table between courses. His palm was sweating. So was hers. Finally, as dessert was being served, Rowan stood. The room went quiet immediately, all attention shifting to the Duke at the head of the table. "If I may have everyone's attention," he said, and his voice was steady despite the fear Seraphine could see in his eyes. "I have something to say." "Rowan," Verena said sharply, "this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time." He looked around the table, meeting eyes deliberately. "You've all been guests in our home this week, and I appreciate your presence. But I've allowed something to continue too long, and it needs to stop." Seraphine's heart hammered. What was he doing? "For 7 years," Rowan continued, "my marriage has been the subject of speculation and gossip. Understandably so. We've given you plenty of material. Separate chambers, obvious distance, no children, all the signs of a failed union." Margaret leaned forward, scenting blood. Several other guests exchanged glances. "And you've been right," Rowan said. "It has been failing. But not because of the reasons you've assumed. Not because Seraphine is inadequate or I'm disappointed or any of the other theories circulating." "Rowan," Seraphine whispered, "you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He looked at her, and his expression was raw. "It's been failing because I've been a coward. Because I was taught that feelings are weakness and distance is strength, and I believed it. I treated my wife like an obligation instead of a partner. I made her feel unwelcome in her own home. I let people speak about her with disrespect and did nothing to stop it." The room was dead silent now. Even Margaret looked shocked. "But that ends tonight." Rowan's voice grew stronger. "Seraphine is my wife. Not a burden, not a disappointment, not a topic for your gossip. She is the lady of this house, and she deserves to be treated as such, by all of you, and especially by me." Verena stood abruptly. "Rowan Blackthorne, sit down this instant. You're making a spectacle." "I'm making a choice." He didn't sit, didn't back down. "The same choice I should have made 7 years ago, to put my wife before propriety, before family politics, before fear." He turned to Seraphine, and she saw tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, but speaking only to her. "For every day I made you feel small. For every moment I chose distance over honesty. For building walls when I should have been building a life with you. I'm sorry, and I'm asking, in front of everyone, if you'll give me another chance to do this right." Seraphine couldn't breathe. The entire room was staring, waiting for her response. Verena looked apoplectic. Lucien's smile was genuine and proud. The other guests seemed split between scandalized and captivated. But all Seraphine could see was Rowan, standing there with his heart visible for the first time in 7 years, offering her everything he'd withheld. "This is highly inappropriate," someone muttered. "This is beautiful," someone else countered. Seraphine stood slowly. Her legs felt unsteady, but her voice when it came was clear. "You're right," she said. "You've been a coward. You've hurt me. You've made me feel worthless in a house that should have been home." Rowan's face went pale, but he nodded. "I know. And I should probably say no. Walk away. Protect myself from more disappointment." "You should," he agreed quietly. "But I'm not going to." She moved around the table toward him, aware of every eye tracking her movement. "Because I've been a coward too. I've let you keep your distance. I've made myself smaller instead of demanding you see me. I've accepted less than I deserve because it was easier than fighting." She stopped in front of him. "So here's my answer. Yes. I'll give you another chance, on one condition. Anything. No more separate chambers, no more careful distance, no more hiding behind propriety when things get hard." She held his gaze. "If we do this, we do it honestly, even when it's messy, even when it scares us. Especially then." Relief flooded his face. "Yes, all of it." I promise. Then we have an agreement. She thought he might kiss her. In front of everyone, scandal be damned, but instead he did something that shocked her more. He knelt. The gasps around the room were audible. A duke didn't kneel. Not to anyone except royalty. Certainly not to his own wife in front of guests. "What are you doing?" Seraphine whispered. "What I should have done 7 years ago." His voice shook, but his eyes were steady. "Choosing you over pride, over tradition, over every rule that says this isn't appropriate." He took her hand in both of his. "I'm not asking you to forgive me yet. I haven't earned that. But I'm asking you to believe I'll try. Every day. To be the husband you deserve instead of the one my father taught me to be." Seraphine felt tears spill over. Around them, the room had dissolved into chaos. Verena arguing with someone, other guests whispering frantically, Lucien laughing with what sounded like genuine joy. But in the center of it all, Rowan knelt before her, breaking every rule to finally do something right. "Get up," she said softly. "Please." "Not until you answer." "I already answered. Yes. I believe you'll try." He stood slowly, and this time he did kiss her. In front of 20 scandalized witnesses, he kissed her like they were alone, like 7 years hadn't taught them to be careful with each other. When they finally broke apart, the room had gone silent again. But this time the silence felt different. Not hostile, but stunned. Rowan turned to address the guests, keeping Seraphine's hand firmly in his. "I apologize for disrupting dinner," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "But I needed witnesses. Needed to make this real in a way I couldn't take back tomorrow." He looked at Verena directly. "The separate chambers end tonight. The distance ends tonight. If that scandalizes you, I understand. But I'm done living my life according to other people's rules." Verena's face was white with fury. "Your father would never—" "My father was miserable and made everyone around him miserable. I won't repeat his mistakes." Rowan's voice was firm. "You're welcome to stay for the remainder of the holiday. You're welcome in this house always. But you will treat Seraphine with respect, or you won't be welcome at all." "I cannot believe—" "Then don't. Leave if you must, but the choice is yours." Verena looked around the table, perhaps expecting support. But the other guests seemed more captivated than outraged. Even Margaret Chesterfield looked grudgingly impressed. "Fine," Verena said icily. "I'll stay, but this conversation isn't over." "Yes," Rowan said gently. "It is." Verena swept from the room. The remaining guests began talking all at once. Some scandalized, some approving, all thoroughly entertained. Lord Ashford stood, raising his glass. "Well, that was certainly the most interesting Christmas Eve dinner I've attended. To the Duke and Duchess. May your renewed vows bring you happiness." Others joined the toast, some enthusiastically, some reluctantly, but they all drank. Lucien approached, still grinning. "Brother, I take back every terrible thing I said about you being emotionally constipated." "You said that out loud?" "Multiple times, but that?" He gestured at the room. "That was magnificent. Father is probably rolling in his grave." "Good," Rowan said, and meant it. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Dinner resumed, though the conversations had shifted entirely to speculation about what they'd just witnessed. Gift exchange happened, though Seraphine barely registered what she received. Caroline began, and she found herself standing next to Rowan, their voices blending on familiar hymns. Through it all, he kept her hand, in front of everyone, making it clear this wasn't a performance. It was a choice. When the evening finally ended and guests began retiring to their chambers, Rowan turned to her. "I had your things moved," he said quietly, "to my chambers. Our chambers now, if that's all right." "You were that confident I'd say yes?" "I was that determined to mean it either way." He smiled, nervous. "If you'd prefer your own space still, I can have them moved back." "No." She squeezed his hand. "No separate chambers. We agreed." They walked through the manor together, past servants who quickly looked away, past family portraits that seemed to judge them from the walls. When they reached his chambers, their chambers, Rowan opened the door and let her enter first. Her things were there, arranged alongside his. Her brushes on the vanity next to his shaving kit. Her dresses in the wardrobe beside his formal wear.
7 years of separation compressed into one afternoon of staff moving belongings from one wing to another. "This is real," she said softly. "This is real," he confirmed. "No more running, no more hiding." "What if we can't do it? What if 7 years broke something that can't be fixed?"
"Then we'll break together instead of alone." He moved closer, hands gentle on her shoulders. "I can't promise perfection. I'll retreat sometimes. I'll struggle with vulnerability. I'll probably disappoint you more times than I succeed." That's a terrible sales pitch. But it's honest, and honesty is all I have to give you right now. Seraphine turned to face him fully. "Then give me that. All of it. The messy, difficult, imperfect truth of who you are. Even the parts that aren't very likable? Especially those, because I'm not perfect either. I'm angry and hurt and terrified this won't work. But I'm here. We're both here. And that's more than we've had in 7 years." Rowan pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway." He laughed, genuine, unguarded laughter that she'd never heard from him before. It sounded rusty, like something long unused, but it was real. They stood there holding each other in the middle of a room that was finally theirs together, while outside the window snow continued to fall on Blackthorn Manor. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Verena's anger, guest gossip spreading across the countryside, questions neither of them knew how to answer yet. But tonight, Christmas Eve, in a house that had spent 7 years frozen, something had thawed. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real from the wreckage of what they'd been. The morning after Christmas Eve, Seraphine woke to unfamiliar warmth. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't place it. Then she remembered. Rowan's arm was across her waist, his breathing steady against her shoulder. They'd fallen asleep talking, somewhere past midnight, still dressed in evening clothes they'd been too exhausted to change out of. 7 years, and this was the first time she'd woken next to him. She lay still, afraid to move and break whatever fragile spell had survived the night. Outside, dawn was turning the snow-covered grounds from black to gray to pale blue. Inside, the fire had burned to embers, and the room held the quiet that came after storms. Rowan stirred, then went still. She felt him realize where he was, who he was holding. For a terrible moment, she thought he might pull away, retreat into old patterns now that witnesses were gone and consequences were settling in. Instead, his arm tightened around her. "You're still here," he said quietly. "Where else would I be? I thought maybe I dreamed it, last night, all of it. If you dreamed it, then we're having the same dream." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm terrified." "Of what?" "That I'll fail at this. That yesterday was easy because everyone was watching, but today, when it's just us, I'll retreat into being the person I've been for 7 years." Seraphine turned in his arms to face him. His hair was disheveled, his formal shirt wrinkled, and his eyes held equal parts hope and fear. "Then we'll figure it out when it happens," she said. "This isn't about being perfect. It's about trying. What if trying isn't enough? Then we'll try harder, or differently, or we'll fail spectacularly and at least know we gave it everything." She touched his face, still getting used to the permission. "But Rowan, I need you to understand something. I meant what I said about honesty. If you start pulling away, I need you to tell me why instead of just disappearing behind walls." "I don't know if I can." "Then learn. We both have to learn new ways of doing this." He nodded slowly, then kissed her forehead. It was tentative, uncertain, but it was real. A knock at the door shattered the moment. "Your Grace," a servant's voice, carefully neutral. "Breakfast will be served in an hour, and Lady Verena requests an audience at your earliest convenience." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Tell my aunt I'll speak with her after breakfast. In the library." "Very good, Your Grace." Footsteps retreated. Seraphine felt Rowan tense against her. "She's going to make this difficult," he said. "Probably. Are you prepared for that?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." They rose and dressed, helping each other with buttons and laces in an intimacy that felt both awkward and necessary. When Seraphine's maid arrived to help with her hair, the young woman's eyes widened at finding the Duke still in his chambers. "Shall I return later, my lady?" "No, Mary. Stay." His Grace was just leaving. Seraphine met Rowan's eyes in the mirror.
We'll see each other at breakfast." He nodded, understanding the unspoken message. They couldn't spend every moment together, couldn't make this so sudden that it looked like performance. They needed to find a rhythm that felt sustainable. "Breakfast then," he said, and left. Mary worked in silence for a few minutes, pinning Seraphine's hair with practiced efficiency. Finally, she spoke. "If I may say, my lady, the staff are pleased about last night." "Are they?" "Most of us, anyway. Mrs. Hallowell thinks it's scandalous, but she's been saying that about everything since before I started working here." Mary secured another pin. "We've watched you these 7 years, watched you get quieter and sadder. Some of us hoped things would change. And the others?"
"Think the Duke will return to normal once the guests leave and the gossip dies down." Mary met her eyes in the mirror. "But I don't think so. Not after what he did last night. A man doesn't kneel in front of 24 witnesses unless he means it." Seraphine felt her throat tighten. "Thank you, Mary." "Just telling the truth, my lady. You deserve to be happy here." Breakfast was a minefield of social navigation. Half the guests had already departed, scandalized or uncomfortable or simply eager to spread the news. The remaining ones watched Seraphine and Rowan with barely concealed fascination. Rowan sat beside her instead of at the head of the table, not touching, but close enough that the message was clear. When Lord Ashford made a comment about the weather, Rowan consulted Seraphine about their plans as though her opinion mattered. When Margaret Chesterfield tried to engage him in discussion about London politics, he redirected the conversation to include Seraphine. Small things. But after 7 years of exclusion, they felt monumental. Lucien watched it all with satisfied amusement. When breakfast ended and guests scattered to pack or gossip or walk the grounds, he caught Seraphine in the hallway. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I don't know yet. Ask me in a week." "Fair enough. For what it's worth, I think you're both braver than you realize." He glanced toward the library where Rowan was preparing to meet Verena. "That conversation is going to be ugly." "I know. Want me to lurk nearby in case reinforcements are needed?" "Rowan needs to do this himself, but thank you." Lucien nodded. "I'm leaving tomorrow. Back to exile or whatever passes for life these days. But Seraphine, if you need anything, if he backslides and you need someone to remind him not to be an idiot, write to me. I mean it." "You're a good brother, even when he doesn't deserve it." "Especially then," Lucien smiled. "Take care of him, and yourself." Not necessarily in that order. He left her standing in the hallway, and Seraphine made a decision. She walked to the library and positioned herself where she could hear without being seen. Eavesdropping was improper, but she needed to know if Rowan would hold firm without her present. Voices filtered through the partially open door. "Absolutely unacceptable," Verena was saying. "The humiliation you caused last night was necessary." Rowan's voice was calm but firm. "And I won't apologize for it. You knelt before your wife in front of guests. You dismissed me from my own family's table. You've made us a laughingstock." "I made a choice. If society judges that harshly, they're welcome to their opinions. This isn't about opinions, it's about legacy. Your father built this family's reputation on strength and dignity, and you're destroying it for sentiment." "My father built our reputation on cruelty and emotional repression," Rowan said, and Seraphine heard steel beneath the calm. "He beat me for crying when my mother died. He destroyed any chance I had at genuine connection because he thought feelings were weakness. I won't perpetuate that. Not anymore." "So you'll throw away centuries of tradition for a woman who can't even give you an heir?" The silence that followed was dangerous. "Careful, Aunt Verena." Rowan's voice had gone very quiet. "You're speaking about my wife, the woman I choose. If you cannot respect that, you're not welcome here." "You would exile me? Your own family? I would ask you to leave until you can treat Seraphine with basic decency. That's not exile, it's a boundary, something this family desperately needs." "Your father is dead, and his way of doing things died with him." Rowan's voice gained strength. "I'm the Duke now. This is my house, my marriage, my choice. You can accept that or you can go. But you will not speak about Seraphine that way again." Seraphine heard movement, then Verena's voice, icy and precise. "You'll regret this. When the passion fades and you're left with an inadequate wife and no heirs, you'll realize I was right. Then I'll live with that regret. But at least I'll be living instead of existing in the prison father built." Footsteps approached the door. Seraphine moved quickly, disappearing around a corner before Verena emerged. The older woman's face was white with fury, but there was something else there too. Hurt, maybe. Or the dawning realization that she'd lost. Seraphine waited until Verena had gone, then entered the library. Rowan stood at the window, shoulders tight with tension.
"How much did you hear?" he asked without turning. "Enough. I should have done that years ago, set boundaries, defended you. You did it now. That's what matters." She crossed to stand beside him. "Are you all right?" "I don't know. I just essentially exiled my aunt. The guests will talk. Society will judge. Everything I was raised to avoid, I just invited into our lives." "So?" He looked at her, surprised. "So? So let them talk. Let society judge. We'll still be here trying to build something real." She took his hand. "Unless you're regretting it already?" "No, no regrets, just adjusting to the consequences. Welcome to marriage, the actual kind, not the frozen performance we've been doing." He laughed, short and surprised. "Is it always this terrifying?" "I have no idea. We're making this up as we go." Over the next few days, the house slowly emptied. Guests departed with promises to write and barely concealed eagerness to spread the scandal. Verena left on the 27th, tight-lipped and formal, accepting Rowan's embrace with stiff reluctance. "I hope you know what you're doing," she said. "I don't," Rowan admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." After she'd gone, the manor felt different, quieter, but in a good way. Less like a museum, more like a home that might actually be lived in. Lucien left last, on the morning of the 28th. He found Seraphine in the conservatory, reading. "I'm going to miss our talks," he said. "You're welcome back any time. Both of us mean that." "I know, but give yourselves some time without me stirring things up." He sat beside her. "Can I give you some advice, last bit before I go?" "Of course. Don't expect perfection from him or yourself. You're both learning how to do this, and you'll fail sometimes. The important part is failing forward instead of retreating backward. Failing forward. Making mistakes that bring you closer instead of pushing you apart. Fighting about real things instead of avoiding conflict entirely. Being honest even when it hurts." He squeezed her hand. "My brother loves you. He's terrible at showing it, but he does. Give him time to learn how." "What if time isn't enough?" "Then you'll know you tried everything, but I don't think it'll come to that." He stood, smiling. "He knelt for you, Seraphine, in front of everyone. Men like Rowan don't do that unless they mean it down to their bones." After Lucien left, Seraphine found Rowan in his study. Their study now, he kept insisting, though she wasn't sure what she'd do in a room full of estate ledgers. "He's gone," she said. "I know. I said goodbye this morning." Rowan set down his pen. "The house feels empty." "Peaceful, you mean?" "That too." He studied her face. "Are you all right? I know this week has been exhausting, terrifying, hopeful." She moved into the room, settling into the chair across from his desk. All of it at once. "I spoke with Mrs. Hallowell this morning about moving forward." He looked uncomfortable. "About changing how things are run here, making the house less like a mausoleum." "What did she say?" "That it's about time. Apparently the staff have been waiting for me to stop acting like my father for years." He smiled wryly. "I was the last to know I was miserable." "Not the last. I knew." "You did, didn't you?" He came around the desk to lean against it, closer to her. "You saw through all of it and stayed anyway." "I didn't have much choice. You had more than you think. You could have left, made enough noise that divorce became inevitable. Lucien would have helped you." "I thought about it," she admitted, "more than once. But something kept me here." "What?" "Stubbornness, mostly, and the hope that maybe someday you'd stop being afraid long enough to actually see me." "I see you now." His voice was soft. "I'm sorry it took so long." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Rowan spoke again, hesitant. "I want to change more than just the household rules. I want to change us. How we spend our days. I don't want separate schedules anymore." "What are you suggesting?" "Breakfast together, regular conversations that aren't about estate business, evening walks when weather permits, reading together in the library.
He was clearly improvising, working through ideas as he spoke them. Things normal married couples do. Things I should have been doing for 7 years.
That sounds nice. Terrifying, but nice.
Why terrifying? Because it means actually being together, not just occupying the same space, but being present with each other. That's vulnerable.
I know.
He reached for her hand. But I want to try anyway. Will you? Yes, but Rowan,
I know.
no promises of perfection, just honest effort. Actually, I was going to say we should probably fight at some point. He blinked.
What?
Fight, argue, disagree about something real instead of just avoiding conflict.
She squeezed his hand. We've been so careful with each other this week, walking on eggshells, but real marriages have friction. You want to fight with me? I want us to be honest enough that disagreement is possible. That's different than fighting just to fight, but it means not swallowing everything to keep peace.
Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're saying we need to trust each other enough to be angry sometimes. Exactly. He laughed. That's surprisingly wise and terrifying. Everything about this is terrifying. We'll get used to it. January arrived cold and bright. The guests were gone, Verena was maintaining distance through stiffly formal letters, and Blackthorn Manor settled into a new rhythm.
It wasn't smooth.
Rowan retreated into work sometimes, forgetting promises to join her for lunch.
Seraphine snapped at him when he made decisions about the household without consulting her. They had their first real argument on the 3rd of January about something stupid, whether to dismiss a servant who'd been caught stealing.
He's been here 10 years, Rowan said. He deserves a second chance. He's been stealing for at least 6 months. That's not a mistake, that's a pattern. Seraphine's voice rose. You're being soft because you're trying to be different from your father, but there's a difference between mercy and being taken advantage of. So what, we just throw him out? Ruin his life over silver spoons? We give him consequences for his actions. That's what adults do, Rowan. They'd stared at each other, both breathing hard, and Seraphine had suddenly realized they were fighting, actually fighting, about something real. We're arguing, she said. I know, I'm sorry. Don't apologize. This is good. Good? He looked baffled. We're yelling at each other. We're disagreeing like people who care about the outcome. That's different than 7 years of careful silence. She moved closer. So what do we do? About the servant? They'd compromised. Final warning, repayment plan, supervision for 6 months. It wasn't perfect, but they'd made the decision together instead of Rowan handling everything alone or Seraphine swallowing her opinion. Small victories. February brought snow and the first real test. Seraphine's monthly courses arrived, and with them the familiar shame. 7 years and still no pregnancy. She'd locked herself in their bathroom, crying silently, waiting for Rowan to retreat or make it about his disappointment. Instead, he'd knock gently. Seraphine, let me in. I'm fine. You're crying, that's not fine. It's nothing, just the usual failure. Silence. Then, can I come in? Please. She'd opened the door, expecting judgment. Instead, he'd pulled her into his arms. This isn't your failure, he said quietly. It's not anyone's failure. It's just what's happening. Everyone expects. I don't care what everyone expects. I care that you're hurting. He'd held her tighter. And I'm sorry. For 7 years of making you carry this alone, for letting you believe your worth was tied to children, for being too much of a coward to tell you that even if we never have heirs, I want you anyway. She'd cried harder then, but differently. Not from shame, but from relief. They'd talked about it that night, really talked. About the pressure, about whether they even wanted children or just felt obligated to want them. About alternatives, adoption, naming an heir from extended family, accepting that maybe the Blackthorn line would end with them.
I think I want children, Rowan said carefully. But not because of legacy or duty, because I want to be a better father than mine was, to prove that Blackthorns can actually love their families instead of just managing them. I want them too, Seraphine admitted, but I'm terrified of failing again, of going through more years of this. Then we stop trying. For now. Take the pressure off entirely. He'd taken her hand. If it happens, wonderful. If it doesn't, we build a different life.
one that's still full and meaningful. Society will judge. Let them. We've survived worse. It wasn't a magical solution. The pressure didn't disappear overnight, but something shifted. The weight of expectation loosened its grip, and they both breathed easier. March brought early spring and unexpected guests. Margaret Chesterfield arrived unannounced, ostensibly to visit neighboring estates, but clearly fishing for gossip. Seraphine received her in the drawing room with perfect courtesy and zero warmth. "Lady Blackthorn," Margaret said, settling into her chair like she owned it. "How have you been? I've been hearing such interesting things." "Have you?"
"About you and the Duke, about your renewed affections." Her smile was sharp. "Some say it's genuine. Others think it's performance to quiet scandal. And what do you think, Mrs. Chesterfield?" "I think performances don't last. Real change requires more than dramatic gestures at Christmas dinner."
Seraphine set down her tea with deliberate calm. "You're right, it does. Which is why we're still here, still working at it months later. Not because anyone's watching, but because we choose to." How progressive. And how convenient that your choice coincided with your husband's brother stirring things up. Lucian didn't stir anything. He just refused to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. Seraphine met Margaret's eyes directly. "Something I wish I'd done years ago." "Well," Margaret shifted uncomfortably, "I suppose time will tell if—" "Time is already told," Rowan said from the doorway. Neither woman had heard him approach. "My wife and I are building a marriage based on honesty instead of propriety. If that makes you uncomfortable, you're welcome to leave." Margaret stood quickly. "I didn't mean to imply—" "Yes, you did. You came here fishing for scandal, hoping we'd already failed so you could spread it across 3 counties. His voice was pleasant, but his eyes were steel. "Unfortunately for your entertainment, we're quite happy. Imperfectly, messily happy. And we plan to stay that way." Margaret left shortly after, flustered and empty-handed. When she'd gone, Seraphine turned to Rowan. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. I'm done letting people disrespect you in our own home." He sat beside her, close enough that their knees touched. "How did I do? Was that too much?" "It was perfect. Terrifying, but perfect." "Good, because I'm still figuring out this whole defending my wife thing. Let me know if I overstep." She laughed. "I will, though you're doing remarkably well for someone who spent 7 years avoiding conflict. I'm motivated. Turns out caring about someone makes you braver than you knew you could be." April brought warmth and something unexpected. Seraphine woke one morning feeling nauseous, dismissed it as bad fish from dinner, and went about her day. But it happened again, and again. By the end of the week, she was too afraid to hope. Mary noticed first. "My lady, should I fetch the doctor?" "No, it's nothing." "Forgive me, but morning sickness isn't nothing." Seraphine's hand stilled on the book she'd been pretending to read. Don't even suggest it. I can't. I've hoped too many times." "Then don't hope. Just know. Let the doctor confirm it." Dr. Bradley arrived the next day, examined her with professional efficiency, and smiled. "Congratulations, Lady Blackthorn. About 8 weeks along, I'd say." The room tilted. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be at this stage. Everything looks healthy. We'll monitor closely, of course, but there's every reason to be optimistic." After he left, Seraphine sat in shocked silence. 8 weeks. That meant sometime in January, during those early fragile days when they were still learning how to be together. She needed to tell Rowan, but fear held her frozen. What if this changed everything? What if he retreated into treating her like a vessel for an heir instead of a person? What if 7 months from now, this pregnancy ended like her hopes had ended every month for 7 years? She found him in the stables, checking on a mare about to foal. He looked up when she entered, smiled, then frowned at her expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I need to tell you something." His face went carefully neutral, and she recognized the old defense mechanisms rising. "Don't," she said. "Don't shut down before I even say it." "I'm not—" He stopped, took a breath. "You're right. I'm sorry. Tell me." "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Rowan stared at her, processing. "You're certain?" "Dr. Bradley confirmed it this morning. About 8 weeks." 8 weeks. He was calculating, she could see it. That's
January,
when we were still fighting about everything, when nothing was settled yet. He moved toward her slowly, like approaching something precious and breakable. When he reached her, his hands were gentle on her arms. "How do you feel?" he asked. Not about the pregnancy abstractly, about this, right now. Terrified. Of what? That this will change everything, that you'll start treating me like I'm fragile instead of human, that we'll lose what we've been building because an heir matters more than I do. Seraphine, and I'm terrified it won't last, that I'll lose this baby like I've lost every hope for 7 years, and I don't know if I can survive that disappointment again. He pulled her close, and she felt him trembling too. "I'm terrified too," he admitted, "of all the same things. But Seraphine, listen to me. This doesn't change what matters. You matter. Us matters. If this pregnancy ends tomorrow or 8 months from now, that doesn't change. Everyone can expect whatever they want. We're not doing this for them. We're not even doing it for legacy or duty. If we have this child, it's because we want to build a family based on love instead of obligation." She pulled back enough to see his face. "Do you mean that?" "Yes. And I'll keep meaning it when you're sick and miserable, when you're scared, when you doubt everything. I'll mean it if we have 10 children or none." He touched her face gently. "You're not a vessel for an heir. You're my wife, the woman I'm learning to love. That doesn't change." "Learning to love? I'm not there yet. I don't know how to love properly. My father made sure of that. But I'm learning, every day, how to be vulnerable and survive it, how to put you first instead of fear, how to build something real instead of just managing expectations." He kissed her forehead. "And if you'll be patient with me, I'll keep learning until I get it right." The tears came then, but good ones. Relief and hope, and the terrifying joy of believing something might actually work out. They stood in the stable, holding each other while the pregnant mare shifted in her stall and spring sun filtered through cracks in the wood. It wasn't romantic. It smelled like horses and hay. Seraphine's dress was getting dusty and Rowan had stable dirt on his hands. But it was real, messy and imperfect and completely honest. Exactly what they'd been building toward. The pregnancy progressed carefully. Seraphine was sick most mornings, exhausted by afternoons, and emotional in ways that embarrassed her until Rowan started keeping track of what made her cry. "Daffodils," he reported one evening. "You cried because the daffodils in the conservatory were blooming. They were beautiful. They were flowers doing what flowers do." "Don't mock me." "I'm not mocking. I'm documenting. Yesterday it was a letter from Lucien. The day before, a particularly fluffy cloud." He was grinning. "I'm starting to think anything remotely pleasant makes you cry. I hate you." "No, you don't. You cried about that too. Said you loved me and it was terrifying." She threw a pillow at him. He caught it, laughing, and she realized this was new too. Playfulness, teasing, the kind of ease that came from actual intimacy instead of careful distance. "I did say that," she admitted. "Do you remember what you said back?" "That I was working on it, on loving you properly instead of fearfully." He set down the pillow and moved to sit beside her. "I think I'm getting closer." "Just closer?" "I'm terrified to say it out loud, like saying it will jinx everything we've built." "That's not how it works, isn't it? In my experience, admitting you care about something is the fastest way to lose it." "Then break the pattern. Take the risk." She took his hand, placed it on her slightly rounded stomach. "We're already risking everything. What's one more terrifying admission?" He was quiet for a long moment, hand warm against her. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. "I love you." Imperfectly and messily and without having any idea how to do it right. "But I love you." "Say it again." "I love you." "Again." "I love you, Seraphine. Have probably loved you for years but was too afraid to admit it, too convinced that loving you would destroy me." His voice cracked. "And maybe it will. Maybe this all falls apart and I end up broken anyway. But I'd rather be broken loving you than safe and empty." She kissed him then, tasting salt from tears she couldn't remember starting. "I love you too. Have for longer than I should admit. Even when I hated you, I loved you." "That's inconvenient." "Extremely. We're both terrible at this." "Agreed. Want to keep being terrible at it together? For as long as you'll have me." Summer arrived with heat that made Seraphine's pregnancy uncomfortable, and beauty that made it bearable. The manor had changed in ways both subtle and obvious. Doors that had been closed for years stood open. Servants laughed in hallways instead of whispering. Seraphine's paintings appeared on walls, her books on library shelves, her preferences incorporated into daily life instead of ignored. Rowan had started morning rides again, but now Seraphine joined him when she felt well enough, riding the gentle mare he'd selected specifically for her. They'd breakfast together, then separate for estate business, reconvening for lunch and spending afternoons in companionable silence, him with ledgers, her with correspondence or needlework. Evenings were for talking, really talking, about fears and hopes and everything in between. "What if I'm terrible at being a father?" Rowan asked one night, his hand on her very pregnant belly. "Then you'll learn, like we learned how to be married." "My father was so bad at it. What if that's hereditary?" "It's not. You already care more about this baby than he ever cared about you. That's the difference." The baby kicked against his palm, and his expression softened in ways she'd never imagined possible 7 months ago. "I felt that." "She's active at night, keeps me awake." "She?" "I don't know, but I keep thinking she. Does that bother you, if it's a daughter instead of a son?" "No. A daughter would be perfect. A son would be perfect. Healthy would be perfect." He leaned down, speaking to her stomach. "Just arrive safely, please. Your mother and I are terrified enough without complications." "Are you talking to my stomach?" "Our stomach, technically. And yes, Dr. Bradley says babies can hear at this stage." "What are you telling her?" "That she's already loved. That we're going to fail at parenting sometimes, but we'll always try. That she's the result of two people learning to be brave together." He looked up, eyes bright. "Is that too much?" "It's perfect." September brought early labor pains that turned out to be false alarms, much to everyone's frustration. Dr. Bradley took up residence in the manor, prepared for whenever the baby decided to actually arrive. Seraphine was exhausted, enormous, and ready to be done. "I'm never doing this again," she announced after another false alarm. "You said that yesterday," Rowan reminded her. "I mean it more today." "You said that too." "I hate you. You say that every hour. Then you cry because you love me, and pregnancy makes you emotional." He helped her back to bed. "Which phase are we in now?" "The hating you phase." "Understood. Let me know when we return to loving me." "Probably in 5 minutes." "I'll wait." True labor started on September 15th in the middle of the night. Seraphine woke to pain and water and fear. "Rowan!" He was awake instantly. "Is it time?" "I think so. I'm scared." "I know. Me too." He rang for servants, sent for Dr. Bradley, and held her hand through contractions that made her curse his entire bloodline. "I'm never letting you touch me again," she gasped between pains. "Understandable. Very reasonable." "This is your fault." "Completely. I take full responsibility. I hate you so much right now." "Love you too." Labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of pain and fear, and Rowan refusing to leave despite tradition demanding husbands wait elsewhere. He held her hand, wiped her face, let her crush his fingers during contractions. "You're doing so well," he kept saying. "I'm dying. This is death." "You're not dying. You're bringing life. There's a difference." "Philosophical distinctions don't help." "Right, sorry. Would cursing help?" "Actually, yes." So he cursed with her, scandalizing Dr. Bradley and the midwife, until finally, a baby's cry split the air. "A girl," Dr. Bradley announced, placing the squalling infant on Seraphine's chest. "Healthy and loud." Seraphine looked down at the tiny, furious creature and felt her heart crack open completely. Red-faced, wailing, absolutely perfect. Rowan was crying. She'd never seen him cry before, but tears streamed down his face as he looked at their daughter. "She's here," he whispered. "She's actually here. We have a daughter. We have a daughter." He touched the baby's tiny hand and she gripped his finger with surprising strength. "Hello, little one. We're your parents. We're going to mess this up sometimes, but we love you already." The baby stopped crying, seeming to recognize his voice. "I think she knows you," Seraphine said. "I've been talking to her for months. Of course she knows me." He leaned down, kissing Seraphine's forehead. "You were magnificent,
terrifying and strong and magnificent. I cursed you extensively.